Tag TV and Tag Radio be seen and heard by both technology users and technology producers throughout the state of Georgia and around the world. Low cost, big benefits, powerhouse online branded video and audio has arrived. Tag TV, Tag Radio, there's a lot more to know. This edition of Tech Talk is brought to you by GlobalSpeak.com, new media consultants, corporate video and audio communications, video and audio production and distribution, live and virtual event production. Tag TV and Tag Radio is a service of GlobalSpeak.com, creatively delivering powerful marketing, video, and audio solutions. One way to describe the phenomenon, creative destruction. The theory of economic innovation and progress today that encompasses the role of, out-of-the-box thinkers that change all the business norms, yet succeed. They seem to emerge from the population on demand as they perceive opportunities available and are well-positioned to take advantage of them. Greetings, everyone. It's Tuesday, May 3rd, 2011, and this is Tech Talk with Technology Association of Georgia President Tino Mandela. You know who they are. They're among the few to recognize or be able to solve a problem and then make a lot of money doing it. Today's Tech Talk goes out into the big blue ocean, as the economists say, to find the real shark. Well, sort of sharks. The edition of Tech Talk looks at the innate traits, extroversion, and propensity for risk-taking of entrepreneurs, those highly creative individuals who imagine new solutions by generating opportunities for profit and reward. And who better to dive deep into the psyche of this American cultural iconic individualist than Thomas Koulopoulos, president and founder of Delphi Group, the Boston-based think tank headed by one of the most influential consultants, acclaimed by Information Week magazine and the author of 8 books. Delphi has served nearly 20,000 clients across all industries, federal and state government agencies around the world. Thomas propelled Delphi to an Inc. 500 company and one of the fastest-growing corporations in the United States. Executive in residence at Bentley University, board member of the Kaplan School for Information Technology, and past founding executive director of the Babson College Research Center for Advanced Business Innovation. Prior to forming Delphi, he was CEO of Conversion Technologies. Ready for some thought leadership on the subject of, thought leadership, and a unique personal perspective on being and building others to be entrepreneurs? Tino Tech Talks Entrepreneurship, Born or Made, with one of the world's most recognized consultants, advisors, and educators, president and founder of Delphi Group, Thomas Koulopoulos.
Tom, thanks for joining me on Tech Talk today.
It's my pleasure, Tino.
It's great to be talking with you again since the summit that you participated in. We've been through another summit since that time, and hopefully your life, I know, has been staying very busy. So let's get started by talking about the entrepreneur. And you started 3 businesses over the course of the last 25 years. So what's changed most in that time from the standpoint of the entrepreneur?
Oh, my gosh, Tino, what hasn't changed in the last 25 years? It's a great question, I guess, to begin with. If I think back to when I started my first company, it was pretty much 25 years ago today, it was such a different world. And, in no small part because of technology, but there's more to it than just that, I think. I'm looking at the economy right now, and it's vaguely reminiscent of what it was like in the late 80s and the early 90s. But what's funny is that I tell folks often that it's in times of recession that really great successes are born. And I've thought about that a great deal, not just because I started my own company in a time of recession and economic decline, but because of all of the the tremendous casualties that we've had from this latest recession near depression. And if you think about it, companies like Microsoft, FedEx, Hyatt, McDonald's, Burger King, I can go on and on, HP, they were all started in times of recession or economic downturn. So there's something there, and if I think back to what I experienced 25 years ago and what a lot of folks are experiencing today, it really is that spark of entrepreneurial energy that comes with a recession. It's sort of counterintuitive, but I think it has a lot to do with what reinvigorates our economy, certainly in the U.S., but at this point, I think we could apply that globally. as well. So if I think of what's really changed, it's an understanding that we can leverage a time of recession. And as an entrepreneur, my goodness, I mean, you can do so many things much less costly than would be the case if the economy was going gangbusters. But you can also build a business overnight today. I couldn't have done that 25 years ago. I really had to try and work at just basic communications and being able to find people to do work for me and to co-locate them in one place and to get office space to do that. Today, none of that applies. Today, you can really build a business overnight. And 25 years ago, that would have been a pipe dream. You could have done. So time has really changed dramatically. The second thing that's changed, Tino, is you can now move work to virtually any place in the globe. I work on a daily basis with people in China, in India, in the Philippines, in Russia, and it just doesn't matter to me where they are anymore. I could never have done that 25 years ago. So I think we're realizing that times of recession can present opportunity for entrepreneurs specifically, and that it's so much easier for an entrepreneur today to build that business, to go from concept to reality in such a short interval of time.
And one of the things you've been writing a lot about lately is the cloud, if you will.
Right.
And when you talk about the cloud, I know that you often link it to speed in which new businesses can start up. So I assume that that's another reason or differentiation point from the entrepreneurs of old. So what's the connection between the cloud and small business or entrepreneurs?
Well, so there's some obvious connections, and they leverage a little bit of what I was just saying, but there are some not-so-obvious ones as well. So the obvious connections have to do with the fact that in the cloud you have so much technology available for free or close to free, and you can quickly leverage technology that would otherwise have cost you dearly to build infrastructure and to buy computers and software and what have you. And that's the obvious stuff, right? But the not-so-obvious stuff is that it really changes the whole notion of risk and reward. Because if you stop to think about it, there have always been people with good ideas. That hasn't
Right.
changed since time immemorial. What has changed is that you can now take virtually any idea and create from it value with virtually no risk. So I can decide to build a business. I can do email blasts. I can have an infrastructure in place. I can look like a big company, have a website up, do all this wonderful stuff, and yet not pay for it. And that really takes the risk away from a lot of what inherently entrepreneurs had to put up with. And it's funny because entrepreneurs never see the risk in the idea. Every entrepreneur believes their idea, his or her idea, is marvelous. That's not where the risk is. The risk is in the execution. And the execution is what's gotten cheap or just outright free, and that completely changes the economics of risk and reward for the entrepreneur. So I think the cloud is going to, create what I call every-nourship. Everyone will have the ability, if they are so inclined or so afflicted, to become an entrepreneur.
I imagine there's some pros and cons with that because there's basically what you're saying is there's very few barriers to entry, particularly in businesses like we see at Technology Association, for example, software.
Right. That's right, especially in software. I mean, everyone wants to develop the next killer app.
Right.
With the iPad and the iPod, we all think we could develop a viral application overnight. And, some of us will. Some of us will. But like you said, it comes with a whole other set of risks, which is that we're all going to be rolling the dice much more often than we ever have before.
Well, you've sold a business to a large company, Dell. In fact, we just had a company here called SecureWorks that sold their business to Dell. And a lot of entrepreneurs are listening in on this. So what did you learn from the process that might help others that are listening in respect to that sale and doing business with a big company like Dell?
Yeah, it's so I sold a company to Perot Systems, and Perot Systems became part of Dell. This is going back to 2003. And I remember at the time marveling at how amazingly complex that transaction was. And we weren't a large company. We were about a $10 million company at the time. But it was extraordinary to me, the amount of complexity in that transaction. And I think if there are things that I would have done a little differently in retrospect, and that I've advised others to do differently, is to make sure that you've got very, very good advisors when you go through that kind of a process. It was a friendly acquisition, we had mutual board members. It was a win-win all around. But there was so much nuance to it that I had never been exposed to before. And the skill of your advisors is so absolutely critical to that kind of a transaction. I mean, the last thing you want to do is to look back on that kind of a great event with any sort of remorse or regret. And a lot of that will depend on the quality of your advisors, because there are so many things, that you just simply cannot predict. You haven't experienced. And as a result, you really need people that have been there before and who kind of have gone through it. Beyond that, I think the way you build a business and grow a business has nothing to do with whether you're ultimately going to sell it. You build value in a business because businesses will operate better, will motivate people better, will create more value with that kind of an attitude and a spirit. It might be that sometimes that business is a good one to position for acquisition. But I don't think you build a business for acquisition. You build a business to have value, to have satisfied customers, to have loyal employees. And if you do that, the acquisition is just one of many options that you can have to continue growing that business and to realizing benefit from it.
So you're an entrepreneur. We have lots of entrepreneurs listening in, and, of course, entrepreneurs in America. Georgia, in fact, we just learned through the Kaufman study, is the number one state for the last decade in the start of new businesses. I don't know if you knew that or not, but we have over 500 per month starting here versus the average in the U.S. Of 324. Now, I'm not sure if all of those are entrepreneurs and what sort of businesses they've all started, but there's a lot of them out there. And so my question to you is, are they born or are they made? And so what's your take on that?
Well, so this is one of those raging debates, and I'll sort of I'll pawn off the question to Peter Drucker, who had a lot to say on this, and I would encourage any of your readers, if they have the time, to pick up a marvelous little book called Innovation and Entrepreneurism that talks a whole lot about the spirit of the entrepreneur. And Drucker's take on this was that not every business is an entrepreneurial business, that the entrepreneur creates a certain type of value. It doesn't just replicate what's already been done. So the dry cleaners down the street is not an entrepreneurially driven business. It's a wonderful business. There's no judgment being passed against the people who run that. They should be applauded and celebrated for their hard work and their effort. But entrepreneurism adds distinct value. It differentiates itself from every other business. And I did know that about Georgia. And I think there's something about the culture of the U.S. in general, the culture of certain parts of the U.S. that does lend itself to not just more risk-taking, but to greater innovation, to greater creativity. And I think you've got a little bit of that spirit in your neck of the woods down there. I think entrepreneurs are not just born, but they don't get to choose. I think entrepreneurs have an affliction. They don't just want to have a business. They need to innovate. They need to create, and there is something that drives them that's almost a pathology. And who knows where that comes from? I've given up trying to figure that out. But it's an absolute necessity. It's like oxygen. They can't survive without that. And serial entrepreneurs are unfortunately driven to do that to an extreme. It's not a healthy extreme all the way. I mentor a lot of graduate students, and I often ask them as one of the first questions, why do you want to have your own business if that's what they want to do? Because it's a choice. There are many ways to create value in this world, and it's not just by having a business. And you can be an internal entrepreneur. You can be an intrapreneur. You can be innovative inside of a large organization. And in many cases, I think we need more of those folks in some of our large organizations. So I think entrepreneurism is certainly a spirit. It's something that you take with you to any business, any endeavor, and some folks are just born with that affliction, I guess.
And we see a lot coming from other parts of the world, China, India, Brazil, Russia, so on and so forth. Is there something about the American culture that positions us or differentiates us in terms of that, giving us that entrepreneurial edge?
Look, so I'm a big believer in developing tolerance for global perspectives and points of view and cultural differences. I think that brings a richness to innovation that we're just beginning to realize and to appreciate. And I look forward to generations where we will be truly working across all of these cultures. I think that will solve some great problems that the world has not been able to tackle up until now. That said, I think there are unique aspects to every national experience, and the American experience is one that tolerates failure. And I see that here more than I do in virtually any other part of the world. And that tolerance for failure is essential to successful entrepreneurism. The reality is that, as we said earlier, the more we roll the dice, the more we all participate in this every-nourship era where we all become entrepreneurs, the more we will have to learn to accept and to appreciate and to even celebrate failure. And not just to pick ourselves back up and move on after failure, but to truly say that we've learned something because of it and that we're better because of it. And we do that well in this culture. We tolerate failure with our kids. We teach them this from a very early age. And I think that is a unique aspect of the American experience that does lend value, not just to what we do in this country, but lends value to the rest of the world. I mean, look, we're still the envy of the world when it comes to higher education, and there's a reason why that is the case, because we do have that tolerance for failure, for experimentation that we teach our children, and that I think really drives this economy. It's why half of all the people employed in the U.S. are employed in small business, very successful small business. And it's also why we need to pay more attention, I think, to that piece of the economy and nurture it and foster it. And it will be, a wonderful place for our kids going forward. No matter what we say about the post-American era, I still think there's a lot of life left in this country and a lot of brilliant people that are going to help to move innovation forward to the next generation and beyond.
Now, your last book, or the last book that we read here at the Innovation Zone, many of our folks picked that up at the summit, and your message was greatly appreciated. Do you have another one in the works?
I do. I've got one in the works, but I've actually done a couple of e-books in the meantime. One is called Living in the Cloud, and folks can get that downloaded at livinginthecloudbook.com. And I'm also working on a new book having to do with the social economy, which fascinates me. I think this world is going to change much more than any of us can begin to fathom as our kids enter the workforce.
Well, we'll keep an eye on that. And, Tom, as always, thanks. Enjoyed talking with you, and thanks for joining me on Tech Talk today.
Thank you, Tino. My pleasure.